I've been an ER doctor for almost 2 decades now. That means I've seen just about everything that can walk, crawl, or be dragged through those automatic sliding doors. Gunshot wounds, car wrecks, overdoses, people who tried and failed to end their lives, and people who almost succeeded. You get used to chaos when it's your daily shift. You grow numb to the screams, to the smell of blood and antiseptic, to the rhythm of death brushing past you like a shadow. But every once in a while, a case comes along that refuses to fade. A case that doesn't just end when the chart is signed and the body is wheeled away. A case that sticks under your skin, waits for you when you close your eyes at night, and whispers in your ear when you think you're finally alone. This is one of those cases. And even now, years later, I still don't have an explanation. It was a Tuesday night. The ER was packed, flu season, short staff, everybody coughing and sneezing and begging for a bed that didn't exist. I just finished suturing a drunk college kid who decided to climb a barbed wire fence when the call came in. Paramedics on the line. Unresponsive male, mid-30s. Collapsed at home. Family started CPR. ETA 5 minutes. That was all they gave us. That was all we needed. We cleared a trauma bay. I slipped on fresh gloves. My heart didn't even spike. After so many years, the routine becomes muscle memory. But when they rolled him in, something in me shifted. He was average in every way. Average build, average height, average clothes. A plain t-shirt, gray sweatpants, socks. No obvious trauma. No blood. No track marks. No signs of a fall. Just lifeless. His skin was pale but not mottled, not yet. Pupils fixed but not dilated. His hair damp with sweat. His lips just beginning to tinge blue. The medic's voice was clipped. Found down in his living room. Wife started compressions. We've been running the code for 12 minutes. No response. We jumped in. Intubation. For access. Epinephrine. Compressions. The whole song and dance. My hands pressed down hard and fast on his sternum. Each crack of rib beneath my palms another grim reminder of how desperate we were. But here's the thing. Sometimes you know. Sometimes you can feel the life draining no matter how much effort you pour in. And with him, I felt it almost instantly. Like there was a wall, invisible but solid, between us and whatever spark used to live inside him. After 27 minutes, we called it. Time of death, 9:46 p.m. The room fell quiet. The kind of silence that weighs on your chest. The nurses began their cleanup, routine and efficient. I peeled off my gloves and stepped back, already preparing to deliver the news to his wife. And that's when I saw it. His hands. Both were clenched into fists. Not the relaxed curl of rigor mortis setting in. This was tight, deliberate. I frowned, motioned to one of the nurses. Together we pried his fingers open. Inside the right hand was a scrap of paper. Tiny, crumpled, soaked with sweat. At first I thought it was trash, maybe stuck there by accident. But when I smoothed it out, my stomach turned cold. Scrawled in jagged handwriting were 5 words. Don't let them take me. Now I've seen notes before. Suicide notes, goodbye letters, frantic scribbles left behind in moments of despair. But this was different. This wasn't staged. This wasn't left for someone to find neatly on a desk. This was hidden, clutched, forced into his hand so tightly it had left indentations in his skin. And those words, they didn't read like someone giving up. They read like someone running, like someone begging. I slipped the paper into an evidence bag, logged it as part of the personal effects. Routine. But my mind kept circling it like a vulture. Who was them? What did he mean by take? And why write it at all, if he thought he was already doomed? Delivering the news to his wife was brutal. It always is. She was in the waiting room, clutching a styrofoam cup of coffee like it was the only thing tethering her to the floor. When I sat beside her, she already knew. They always do. Her face crumpled, and she asked me the question they all ask. Why? I told her the truth, that we didn't know yet, that the autopsy might give answers, that sometimes hearts just stop. It was all I could offer, and even as the words left my lips, they sounded empty. She shook her head. No, he was fine. He was fine this morning. And then she told me something that made the hairs on my arms stand on end. The night before, he'd woken her up, middle of the night, sat on the edge of the bed, sweating, shaking, eyes darting around the room like he was listening for something. When she asked what was wrong, he whispered, "They're coming for me. Don't let them take me." She thought it was a nightmare, sleep paralysis, stress. He'd brushed it off, refused to explain, and by breakfast he was back to normal. But now, sitting there in the hospital, her husband gone cold in the trauma bay, she looked at me with eyes that demanded answers. "What did he mean?" she asked. I didn't know what to say. Later that night, I sat alone in the doctor's lounge, the hum of the vending machine, the only sound in the room. I should have been filling out charts, but all I could see in my mind was that note. Don't let them take me. I turned the words over and over. I told myself it was just a coincidence, just the ramblings of a man in some kind of mental break, that toxicology would come back and prove it. Drugs, alcohol, something, anything. But deep down, a part of me didn't believe it, because I'd seen fear before, real fear. And whatever haunted him, it hadn't just killed him. It had followed him to the very end. That was the first time I thought maybe the R wasn't the safest place in the world. We're supposed to be the people who save lives, the ones who drag you back from the brink. But with him, it felt like we were bystanders, like the real fight was happening somewhere else, in some space we couldn't see, and we were powerless to intervene. And I wish I could tell you that was the end, that his case closed neatly, that I could file it away in the vault of tragedy and move on. But it wasn't the end, because a week later, another patient came in. Different man, different story, same note. 1 week later, just when I had finally convinced myself to let go of Daniel Mercer's case, another patient came in. It was almost midnight, a slow hour in the ER. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting that harsh blue-white glow that makes even healthy skin look sick. I was standing at the nurse's station, half reading labs, half fighting off exhaustion, when the ambulance bay doors burst open. 2 paramedics rolled in a man on a stretcher, middle-aged, maybe early 40s. And as soon as I laid eyes on him, my stomach dropped, because I already knew. He looked almost identical to Daniel when they brought him in. Pale, clammy skin. No trauma, no visible wounds. Eyes half open but vacant. Lips carrying the faintest blue tint. The medic rattled off the report. Collapsed at work. Co-workers found him slumped over his desk. No pulse on our arrival. CPR in progress for 14 minutes. I jumped in with the team. Intubation. Meds. Compressions. My hands pressed into his sternum. Sweat dripping down my forehead. The room filled with the rhythm of the code. Voices calling out vitals. The beep of monitors. The clatter of instruments hitting the tray. But it was like deja vu. Because just like with Daniel, there was that wall. That invisible barrier between us and him. Like no matter how hard we fought, whatever had taken him wasn't letting go. We worked him for 25 minutes before I had to say the words I hate most. Time of death, 12:41 a.m. Silence fell. Gloves peeled off. The room emptied slowly, the energy drained. And just as I turned to step out, I noticed something. His left hand, clenched tight. My pulse kicked up. My hands trembled as I pried his fingers open. And there it was, a crumpled scrap of paper. 5 words, jagged and frantic. Don't let them take me. The room felt colder, like the AC had dropped 10 degrees. My throat went dry. I bagged the paper, labeled it, logged it, professional, detached, the way we're trained to do. But inside, I was spiraling. One case like this, you chalk it up to coincidence, a freak occurrence. But two men, week apart, both dying without cause, both clutching the same desperate message in their hands. That's not coincidence. That's a pattern. Later, in the doctor's lounge, I tried to make sense of it. Maybe they were connected. Maybe it was some underground group, some cult, some shared delusion. But background checks turned up nothing. Different jobs, different neighborhoods, no overlapping acquaintances. And yet, the words were the same. Don't let them take me. I brought it up to Alvarez, the detective assigned to Daniel's case. When I told him about the second note, He went quiet. Too quiet. Finally he said, "We've been digging into Daniel's apartment. You know what we found?" I waited. Notes. Dozens of them. Stuffed in drawers, taped under the bed, hidden inside books. All the same sentence. Over and over. Like he was living with that thought on a loop. I swallowed hard. And the second guy? Alvarez sighed. His wife said he hadn't been sleeping. Kept telling her someone was watching him. That he heard scratching at the windows at night. She thought he was losing it. Now he trailed off. Neither of us wanted to finish the sentence. Back at the hospital, I tried to talk about it with the other doctors. With the nurses. I thought maybe sharing would make it feel less heavy. But they just shook their heads. Stress, one said. Probably some shared psychological phenomenon. People write weird things before they die. Another joked. Maybe you've been watching too many horror movies. I laughed along, but inside, I didn't feel like laughing, because I knew what fear looked like. I'd seen it etched into both men's faces, frozen in their eyes. This wasn't stress. This wasn't coincidence. This was something else. The autopsy reports came back. Clean. Both men had healthy hearts, healthy organs. No toxins. No strokes. Nothing that explained why they were alive one minute and gone the next. The cause of death. Undetermined. And I couldn't shake the thought that it wasn't something happening inside their bodies, but something happening outside of them. Something we couldn't measure. Something we couldn't name. That week, sleep became impossible. I'd come home from a 12-hour shift, collapse into bed, and lie awake staring at the ceiling. Every creak of the house made me jump. Every shadow seemed too dark, too long, too deliberate. And sometimes, just on the edge of sleep, I'd hear it. A whisper. Not words. Just a sound. Like someone breathing against the back of my neck. I'd snap awake, knife in hand, lights blazing. Nothing. Always nothing. But the fear was real. The kind that doesn't just make your heart race. It settles in your bones, hums in your blood, makes every cell in your body scream. Something is wrong. The third patient came in 2 weeks later. This time it was a woman, 41 years old, found collapsed in her kitchen by her teenage daughter. No signs of trauma, no medical history that could explain it. When she arrived, she was already gone. And yes, when we opened her hand, there it was. Another note. The same 5 words. Don't let them take me. By then, I stopped pretending it was coincidence. 3 different patients. 3 different lives. Same terror carved into their final moments. And I started to wonder, if the notes weren't just warnings, what if they were instructions? What if these people were fighting something I couldn't see, couldn't touch, couldn't stop, and they were leaving behind the only advice they could? Don't let them take you. But resist what? That question gnawed at me until it consumed every waking thought. I tried to bury myself in charts, in cases, in the endless flood of emergencies. But even in the middle of chaos, a man clutching his chest, a child burning with fever, I'd glance down and see the words etched into my memory. And then one night, I saw something that made my blood run cold. It was 3 a.m. I was walking through the trauma wing, heading back from radiology. The halls were quiet, the kind of quiet that buzzes in your ears. And then I noticed a patient room. Empty. Lights off. But inside I saw movement. At first I thought it was a trick of the glass, my own reflection warped by fatigue. But when I stepped closer I froze. Because it wasn't me. It was something tall, thin, standing in the corner of the dark room. Its limbs bent wrong, its head tilted just a little too far, watching me. I blinked. The lights flickered, and when they steadied, the room was empty. I didn't tell anyone. What was I supposed to say? That I saw a shadow person stalking the halls of the hospital. That 3 patients had died clutching the same note, and now I was seeing things too. They'd pull me off duty. Say I'd cracked under stress. But deep down, I knew the truth. It wasn't just my patients who were in danger anymore. It was me. I used to think the worst thing in medicine was losing a patient. You train your whole life to save lives, and when one slips through your fingers, it stings like nothing else. But I was wrong. The worst thing isn't losing a patient. It's realizing you can't even explain why they're gone. After the third death, I started counting. Not out loud, not officially, but in my head. 3 bodies, 3 sets of notes, 3 faces frozen in the same mask of terror. And I couldn't stop asking myself, when does a coincidence stop being coincidence? I didn't have long to wonder, because the 4th body came in that very week. It was a teenager, 17 years old, found dead in his own bed. No history, no drugs, no warning. His parents swore he'd been laughing with them at dinner, playing video games, acting perfectly normal. But in the ER, he was just another cold body on my table. And in his right hand, curled so tight his nails had broken the skin, was a spiral-bound notebook. On the very first page, jagged black ink spelled the same plea. Don't let them take me. That was the moment my professional detachment cracked. I looked at his face, smooth, young, untouched by time, and I thought of my own nephew, about the same age. Thought of the way he still calls me, Uncle Mike, even though he's nearly grown. And I realized I wasn't just dealing with a mystery anymore. I was staring at a pattern, a chain, one I couldn't break. Detective Alvarez came back to the hospital that night. When I handed him the notebook, he didn't crack a joke. He didn't shrug it off. He just stared at it, jaw tight, lips thin. Finally, he said, "I shouldn't even be telling you this, but you're in it now." He leaned closer, lowered his voice. "This isn't just your hospital. Same things happening in other districts. Different hospitals, different victims. No connection, but always the same words. Always." I swallowed hard. "How many?" Alvarez didn't answer, but the look in his eyes told me enough. Too many. That night, I locked my apartment door twice, shoved a chair under the handle, drew every curtain. Still, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw their faces. Daniel, the middle-aged man, the woman, the boy, each of them staring at me with that same expression, wide-eyed, desperate, pleading. And behind them, in the shadows, something else, long thin, watching. Around 3 a.m., exhaustion dragged me under, and I dreamed. In the dream, I was back in the ER, standing over an empty bed. The monitors beeped, steady and calm, even though no one was there. The room smelled of antiseptic and iron. Then, one by one, the drawers of the crash cart slid open. Instruments clattered onto the floor, scalpels, clamps, syringes, as though an invisible hand was rifling through them. And then the overhead light flickered. When it steadied, the bed was no longer empty. Daniel lay there, eyes wide, lips trembling. He whispered without sound, mouthing the same words over and over. "Don't let them take me." Then the boy appeared beside him. Then the woman. Then the others. The bed was suddenly crowded with bodies, stacked like cordwood, all mouthing the same thing, all reaching toward me with pale, trembling hands. And in the corner, a shadow stretched taller and taller, its limbs unfolding like broken scaffolding, its head bent too far to one side. I woke choking, heart hammering, knife clutched in my sweaty fist. The clock read 3:12 a.m., the exact same time I'd woken after the first nightmare. I told myself it was just stress, just sleep deprivation, until I walked into my kitchen and froze, because on the counter, beside the half-empty whiskey glass I'd left the night before, was a piece of paper. Not my paper, not my handwriting, the same jagged scrawl. "You're next." The next day, I didn't go to work. I couldn't. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. My chest felt like a vice was clamped around it. I sat at my table staring at that paper for hours, waiting for it to vanish, waiting to wake up. It never did. By evening, I caved and called Alvarez. When I told him about the note, I expected him to laugh, to tell me I needed a vacation, to suggest I see a psychiatrist. Instead, there was silence. Finally, he muttered, "Lock your doors. Don't go anywhere alone. And whatever you do, don't ignore it." Then he hung up. That was the moment I realized he wasn't investigating a crime anymore. He was surviving it. The following week, I dragged myself back to the ER. I told myself I'd keep my head down, focus on medicine, let the police handle the rest. But medicine doesn't care what you want, because that night, another patient came in. This time it was a young woman, early 20s, collapsed at a cafe. Her skin was pale, her pupils blown, her pulse erratic. We worked frantically, meds and compressions, shocks that lifted her small body from the bed. For a moment, I thought we had her, thought she'd claw her way back. But then her monitor flatlined, and no matter what we did, it stayed that way. Another death, another case with no explanation. And when we unclenched her hand, there it was, a napkin, crumpled and smeared with sweat. 5 words, written in rushed, jagged ink. Don't let them take me. I excused myself, stumbled into the supply closet, and threw up. Because it wasn't just death anymore. It was contagion. It was spreading. That night, back home, I didn't even try to sleep. I sat awake, staring at the walls, waiting. And sometime past midnight, I heard it again. A scrape. From inside my bedroom closet. The same closet where I found the first note. My blood turned to ice. My knife was already in my hand. Step by step, I crept toward the door. My heart pounded, so hard I thought my ribs would split. And just as I reached for the handle, 3 knocks. Slow, deliberate. From inside, I stumbled back, breath hitching, knife trembling in my grip. And then, in a voice stretched thin, like it was being dragged through water, I heard it. My name. Michael. The closet door creaked open an inch, and in the darkness, something moved. I stood frozen at the foot of my bed, knife trembling in my grip, the air so heavy I could barely breathe. The closet door creaked wider, and for a second, just a second, I saw it. Something long, too long, a shape that bent as though bones meant nothing. Fingers thin and spidery, curling around the frame of the door. Then darkness. The light in my bedroom flickered, buzzed, and when it steadied, the closet was empty again. Just shoes, coats, shadows. But I knew what I'd seen, and I knew it hadn't been a dream. That morning, I stumbled into the hospital on autopilot. Coffee didn't help. The overhead lights felt like interrogation lamps, every sound too loud, every face too sharp. When Alvarez showed up, he looked worse than me. His tie was crooked, his eyes bloodshot. He carried himself like a man who hadn't slept in weeks. Rough night. I asked, try to sound casual. He just stared at me, then said quietly, "You heard it, didn't you?" My stomach dropped. Heard what? That voice, he whispered, calling your name. From the dark. I didn't answer. I didn't have to. His silence was enough. We sat in my office, blinds drawn, door locked. Alvarez dropped a manila folder on my desk. Photos spilled out. Pale faces, wide eyes, mouths frozen mid-scream. 6 more in the last 3 days, he said flatly. All ages, all backgrounds. No toxins, no trauma. Same notes. I picked up one photo, hands shaking. A woman in her 60s, her face slack, but her eyes stretched wide with fear. In her left hand, clutched so tight the skin tore, was a scrap of paper. Don't let them take me. I shoved the photo back. What the hell is this, Alvarez? What are we even looking at? He rubbed his temples. I don't know, but I do know one thing. It's not human. The word hung in the room like smoke. Not human. And the worst part, I believed him. That night, the ER was busier than usual. A car accident had flooded the trauma bay, blood and glass, and the metallic stench of adrenaline. For hours, I was too busy to think, too focused on sutures and 4 lines, and the fragile dance of keeping people alive. But around 2 a.m., when the last patient was wheeled off to recovery, the silence hit me like a wall. I turned off the monitors. One by one, the flat lines blinked into darkness. And then I noticed something. The window above the nurse's station. Someone was standing there. A tall, thin silhouette pressed against the glass, its head tilted at an unnatural angle, watching. I spun around, but the hallway outside was empty. When I looked back, so was the window. Sleep was no longer an option. Every night, the same thing. The scrape, the voice, the notes left where I hadn't placed them. Sometimes under my pillow, sometimes in the refrigerator. Once, taped to the bathroom mirror so that when I stumbled and half awake, the words blurred into my reflection. Don't let them take you. I stopped eating, stopped sleeping, My hand shook too much to hold a scalpel steady, and the worst part was the staff started noticing. One nurse whispered to another when she thought I couldn't hear, "He looks like one of the patients." And she was right. I did. Alvarez called again. "I need to show you something," he said. We met at a diner on the edge of town, the kind of place where the coffee tastes like burned rubber and the neon sign never fully lights. He slid a small recorder across the table. This was from one of the houses. A husband found it under his wife's bed after she died. He pressed play. At first, just static, then a low hum, like something deep underground, and then a voice. Not hers, not his. A voice that slithered between syllables, too stretched, too wet, whispering the same phrase over and over. "Don't let me take you." I slammed the recorder shut, bile rising in my throat. Alvarez just nodded grimly. "Yeah, that's what I thought too." Back at the hospital, I tried to focus on work, on anything normal. But normal was gone, because that night, we admitted a man in his 40s, perfectly healthy, collapsed at his desk. By the time he reached us, he was barely conscious, pupils blown, heart racing like a trapped bird. I leaned over him, flashlight sweeping across his eyes. "Sir, can you hear me?" His lips trembled. He grabbed my wrist with shocking strength, his nails digging into my skin, and in a voice raw and broken, he whispered, "They're here." Then the monitor flatlined. I froze, watching as his grip slackened, his hand falling away. When I pulled back, I saw it. On my wrist. Not a scratch, not a bruise, but a word, scrawled into my skin like it had been burned there. Next, that was when I realized, this wasn't just happening to my patients anymore. It was happening to me. I stumbled back, hands shaking, bile in my throat. One of the nurses caught my eye, ready to ask if I was okay. But then her gaze flicked to my wrist, her face drained of color. She backed away without a word. And I knew, in that moment, I couldn't hide it anymore. Whatever was happening in my ER and my apartment, in my nightmares, it had marked me. And if the pattern held, if the whispers were right, if every note was a prophecy, not a warning, then I wasn't just the doctor on this case. I was the next victim. That night, when I returned home, the apartment was darker than I had ever seen it. Every bulb dim, every corner stretched too far. On the table lay a single sheet of paper. Not jagged, not rushed. This one was neat, precise, and in the center, in letters so sharp they looked carved into the page, with 3 words. "We're almost there." The note sat on my kitchen table, its black letters so sharp they almost looked like wounds. "We're almost there." I didn't touch it. I didn't move it. I just sat across from it, staring, like maybe if I glared hard enough, the words would erase themselves. But they didn't. And deep down, I knew. The notes had escalated. First warnings, then threats, now inevitability. By the time I dragged myself back to the hospital the next day, Alvarez was waiting in my office. He didn't bother with pleasantries. His hands were shaking, his face hollowed out by exhaustion. He tossed another file on my desk. "2 more last night," he muttered. "A couple. Died in bed together. Same notes under their pillows." He leaned closer. "It's spreading." I wanted to argue, to say something rational. Contamination, carbon monoxide, mass hysteria. But the words wouldn't come, because I'd seen the scratches on my own skin. I'd heard the voice call my name, and I'd read the note waiting for me at home. "We're almost there." Alvarez must have seen something in my eyes, because he didn't push. He just sat back, rubbed his face, and whispered, "We're screwed." That night, the ER was quieter than usual. Too quiet. A few stitches, a sprained ankle, nothing serious. But every sound seemed wrong. The tick of the clock too loud. The hum of the lights too sharp. At 1:13 a.m., the power flickered. Every monitor went black. The silence was deafening. Then, one by one, the machines snapped back online. Heart monitors, ventilators, infusion pumps. Each one screaming an alarm, though every patient's vitals were fine. It was chaos, nurses scrambling, alarms shrieking, lights buzzing overhead. And then, through the noise, I heard it. A whisper. Not on my head, not on the walls. Right behind me. Michael. I spun around. The hallway was empty, but all the doors lining the trauma bay had swung open at once. And inside each room, every patient was sitting up, not moving, not speaking, just staring, eyes wide, fixed on me. I staggered back, heart hammering. The knife I'd been keeping in my coat pocket felt useless now. My hand shook as I pulled it free anyway, holding it like a toy weapon against giants. "Leave me alone," I shouted, my voice breaking. And then movement. A shadow rippled across the far wall, stretching too long, too thin. It slid like oil across the tile until it towered over me, limbs bending at impossible angles. The patients' heads turned in unison, following the shadow, their mouths opening in silent screams. And then, every monitor in the ER flatlined at once, a wall of shrill alarms. I don't remember running, but suddenly I was outside, gasping in the cold night air, my hand still clutching the knife, like it could anchor me to reality. The city looked the same. Cars passed, neon signs buzzed. Somewhere a couple laughed, but I knew the truth. I wasn't in the same world anymore. I was in theirs. I didn't sleep for 2 days after that. Coffee, pills, whiskey. Nothing could quiet the whispers. Every shadow stretched too far. Every silence buzzed with something just out of reach. On the third night, Alvarez called. His voice was thin, broken. "They came for me," he said, and then the line went dead. The next morning, he didn't show up for work. I drove to his apartment. The door was locked from the inside. When they broke it open, he was on the floor, eyes wide, mouth frozen mid-scream, and in his hand a note. "Don't let them take me." I stopped being a doctor after that. I couldn't. Not when every patient's face blurred into Daniel's, into Margaret's, into Alvarez's. Not when every body on a gurney felt like a preview of my own. But here's the part that still haunts me. I never stopped seeing the notes, even after I left, even after I tried to start over. Some mornings, I'll wake up and find one on my nightstand. Some nights, I'll go to pour a drink and see one taped inside the fridge. Always the same message. Don't let them take you. But lately, the words have changed. Last week, I found one under my pillow. Neat handwriting, not jagged. "Come." It said, "Stop resisting." So here I am, telling you this story. Because maybe if I get it out, if I share it, if I let someone else carry a piece of it, maybe I won't be alone when they finally come. And I know they will. Because last night, just before dawn, I woke to the sound of 3 deliberate knocks. Not on the door, not on the walls, but from inside my closet. And when I opened my eyes, there was a note waiting on my chest, in sharp black letters. "We're here."